Hello and welcome to this edition of A Quick Pint. Now, today I'd like to talk again about Lucy Letby, and specifically the question, is Lucy Letby innocent? Because this has been a question I've been surprised to find is now frequently being asked in certain circles, and in many ways it appears to be almost the new skepticism signalling, the new way that a certain kind of person tries to signal their intelligence by seeming highly skeptical, or tries to signal in some ways almost how anti-establishment and how dissident they are by saying, oh well, anything that is said to me via the newspapers and via television and via anything mainstream must be wrong and must be a lie. And therefore, I'm going to be skeptical of it, which is in some ways being gullible and believing everything is not that dissimilar from being unreasonably skeptical and believing nothing. But I want to look at this, and I was inspired to look at it by a video by History Debunked by Simon Webb, who normally I agree with on quite a lot. But what he argued was there was no evidence that Lucy Letby was guilty. There was no confession. The only evidence was that she was on duty when these 7 babies died. That it could have been explained by something completely different, therefore, such as sudden infant death syndrome, and that she's probably not the mass murderer that it's being suggested that she is. In addition to what he has said, there are others that have pointed out that there is no autopsies that have shown that these 7 babies were killed by methods such as the injection of insulin or the injection of air or the overfeeding of milk. And therefore there are no actual autopsies proving that these babies have died in these ways. Now, let us actually look at the evidence. The evidence is far more substantial than Simon Webb makes out. First of all, there is a confession. There is a note found in her, a number of notes found in her room, in which she states in no uncertain terms, and these are notes which were found lying about her house. She must have suspected, she knew she was under suspicion. She must have thought it possible that the police would raid her home eventually and raid her parents' home. And yet there are post-it notes lying about saying things like, I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. I am a horrible person. In capital letters, I am evil. I did this. Now, I don't understand what that can be seen as other than a direct confession of guilt. She has written down on these various different post-it notes and in dense writing that she is guilty. So it seems to me there is a confession. Secondly, there are patterns of unusual behaviour, such as sending sympathy cards to the parents of those whose babies she is alleged to have killed, and keeping photographs of those sympathy cards on her phone as mementos. Thirdly, she did a great deal of searching on Facebook and whatever for the parents of those whom she had killed, and she did so seemingly within minutes of having committed the act. There is an extraordinary pattern of behaviour where, she does lots of searches for lots of parents, but with regard to those who are the parents of those she's alleged to have killed, this is done at the exact time, pretty much, that those babies have been killed, which is, of course, is very, very suspicious behaviour. For the next, she took home and kept the hospital notes and the record sheets in relation to the babies that she killed, almost as though she was keeping mementos of it. This is, again, most unusual behaviour that is consistent with her having killed these babies. Of course, most importantly, the hospital shift patterns are quite clear. The only person that was on duty when all of those 7 babies were killed was Lucy Letby. So it would be a quite extraordinary coincidence if she was not involved. In addition, she has diary entries, and she seems to make diary entries with regard to the events surrounding specifically the deaths of those babies whom she is alleged to have killed. In addition, there are points where she goes on holiday. Now, one of the things that was noted in the case was, of course, and the reason why suspicions were aroused was that, this is a premature baby ward in which babies are born very very early, and they do have a tendency to die. But so there's a normal mortality rate, but the mortality rate had spiked up from between June 2015 and June 2016, which is when Lucy Letby was supposed to be operating. But there were periods where, for example, she would go on holiday, and then the mortality rate would collapse back down to normal levels. And then she would come back, and the mortality rate would go up again. So you have a very large amount of evidence, and also perhaps as well. In addition, she was basically caught in the act by parents interfering with their babies. Parents came in and found their baby screaming in pain, and Lucy Letby happens to be there. And further, in addition to that, then we have the evidence I'll look at in a minute of the babies that she didn't kill, the 6 babies that she attempted to kill, and how she went about doing that. So it seems to me you have a large cumulative case. Now, you can interrogate each aspect of that cumulative case, and you can say, oh, this aspect on its own is uncertain, and that is indeed true. The confession itself is uncertain. You could argue she was under a great deal of pressure. People were alleging she had killed these babies. She was so stressed, and this confession was some sort of semi-fictitious outworking of her feelings. That's what the lawyer argued in court. Now, that seems to me to be most improbable. Why on earth would you do that? It seems to me just so unlikely. But okay, that is possible. Granted, that is possible. Or similarly, yes, indeed, it could be a coincidence that she happens to be there when all of these the only person on duty that connects all of these babies that die. That is possible. But then it becomes even more unlikely when you consider that when she goes away on holiday, then the mortality rate collapses back to normal levels. So each of these levels of a cumulative case can be interrogated and said that they don't prove it in themselves, but taken together, you have a very persuasive cumulative case. And it's the same with a video that I would point your attention to by Poe the Person, where an old video this is, where she looks at the film 12 Angry Men, the 1950s film 12 Angry Men, about a jury deliberating over whether someone's guilty, and they ultimately conclude that that person is not guilty because each of the elements of the cumulative case can be questioned. But Poe the Person argues rather convincingly, in my view, and in fact demonstrates mathematically, that the likelihood of this person being innocent in the light of this substantial cumulative case is fantastically tiny. What you have is a very persuasive cumulative case, even if each element of it can be questioned. Now, one of the points that's been raised, not by Simon Webb, but by somebody else, is that there's no actual autopsy which shows that any of the babies that died via over-injection of air or of insulin or of too much baby milk. But that's not really the argument, is it? What the argument is that the babies that survived, yes, there was no autopsies on these babies that died, but the babies that survived, they were found to have been subject to that treatment. And so to that abuse. And so the argument is that it seems likely that that was the method she used to kill the other babies. No one is saying they know how because there was no autopsy, how the babies that were killed were killed. They're simply saying that there were babies that were almost killed, babies that almost died, that have now been left, by the way, with life-changing injuries and are 7 years old and are just in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. And those babies died via that method. I would also note that Lucy Letby noted with regard to babies F and L, she accepted that babies F and L, who I believe survived, that could only be attempted murder. That the insulin that was placed into them, she agreed that was an issue of murder. She agreed that was the case. As far as she was concerned, all the evidence indicated it. That must have been murder for babies F and L, where the insulin was involved. So in terms of what actually happened, you have three possibilities. One, there are 2 murderers on the ward, of which Lucy Letby is one of them. 2, Lucy Letby is being framed for other people committing murders or trying to commit murders of babies on the ward. Or 3, and in light of the cumulative case that we have, there is one baby on the ward, murderer on the ward, and that is Lucy Letby. Now, which is the most likely? I would strike to me that it's obviously point three, which is that there is one murderer on the ward, and that is Lucy Letby, and it's as though she effectively confessed to that. So it seems to be fairly clear that she is, of course, guilty. Now, you can look at why. I looked in the last video at Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This is the idea that a person wishes to draw attention to themselves and does so via harm. Munchausen is via harming themselves and being the victim. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is that you wish to draw attention to yourself and seem the victim via somebody else, i.e. via a child or whatever, and thus garner sympathy and thus garner attention. And it's been argued that's what she was doing. And by killing these babies, of course, or hurting these babies, she was ensuring that a particular doctor, a married consultant, would come onto the ward and help, and therefore she could be with him and she could impress him and she could seem like the darling, caring Florence Nightingale nurse in front of him. So basically she was in love with him, and that's what motivated her behaviour. And there is quite a lot of evidence for this. She talked about in her diaries and in notes she left, she talked about she did these declarations of love for the doctor. She said, I loved you, you were my best friend, love was all we needed, but time let us down. She was broken-hearted, no one will ever know what happened and why, I trusted you with everything and loved you, I really can't do this anymore, I just want life to be like it was, we are best friends. She called him sweetie. He said he would trust her. She was the only nurse he would trust with his own children. They discussed going on holiday together. He brought chocolates for her apparently into the County of Chester Hospital, but he did give evidence against her in the end. She contradicted this by saying things like, I don't flirt with him, certainly don't fancy him, ha ha, just a nice guy. But then, I mean, those kinds of contradictions are to be expected in that context. She also talked about it was her best friend. I loved you. I think you knew that. I wanted you to stand by me, but you didn't. So it seems that seems to be possibly what's motivating it. Others are now talking about sort of covert narcissism, and I might do another video where I look at that possibility, because the evidence of what's causing this is now gradually coming out. But it seems to me to be fairly clear that this woman is guilty, and the evidence is overwhelming. And some of you might wish to sort of skepticism signal and feel that you're being edgily dissident by disagreeing with this. Let's face it, this just overwhelming media drum, which is going on and on and on and on about this. And you can be skeptical, and you can argue why they're doing this, why they're going on about it. They're arguing it to cover up other things and to not draw attention to other things that are happening. And isn't it the right kind of person that's been found guilty? And isn't this good for the agenda and all of this stuff? And that may be true. That may be true, but I don't think it subtracts from the fact that there is a very strong cumulative case that Lucy Letby was guilty of killing those 7 tiny little babies and attempting to kill 6 more, and in many cases permanently injuring them and wrecking their lives in the process.